Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives. Well, I think it's time that we reach the end of the Spider-Verse era, as I call it, as we wrap up the Tangled State storyline with Web Warriors number 11. Now, last time on Web Warriors! Put simply, things were kind of going to hell. The Electroverse army managed to break free from their Faraday cage on Earth 803, and while Billy Brannick and Mayday Parker did their best to fend them off, sadly, it was two Spideys against an army of Electros. And while the army of Electros had a disadvantage since they were malnourished, sadly, that was still a matter of sheer numbers, especially since one of their Electros was a big hive mind conglomerate of hundreds of Electros. Now, ultimately, thankfully, though, the Web Warriors, through means of their own, managed to make it to Earth 803 from on their own. Managed to make it to Earth 803. In the case of Octavia Otto, since she and Karn were cut off from the rest of the Web Warriors, they decided they would gather a new army of Spideys to start to and take that army to Earth 803, with that army including Spider-Ben and Spider-Gwen, whom they did manage to find on Spider-Ham's world. On top of that, back on Earth 138, Anya, Hobie, May Riley and the Megamorph Spider-Man managed to rig a system in order to sync up their watches back to the web and use that to open a portal to Earth 803 to assist the fighting. Unfortunately, though, they brought a giant robot to a army with a bunch of electric people who can hijack said robot, and well, that's exactly what they do. The battery seeing the Megamorph Spider-Man coming in, ordering its Electros to overpower, and while Megamorph Spider-Man manages to get out of there before he gets fried, well, how he does that is by ripping the head off of the suit, which does keep him safe since the head was the cockpit, but it also leaves the suit vacant, which allows the battery to come in and take control of it. So now the Electro army has an indestructible giant robot on their side, which is not really good for the assorted Spideys. In the meantime, in other parts of the multiverse, specifically the Marvel Noir universe, Spider-Man Noir, Spider-Man India, and Spider-Ham wound up meeting after having kind of a disagreement after learning about how modern technology is bleeding over into the Marvel Noir universe, confront who they think is the source of it. In this case, another version of Harry Osborn who bled over into the Marvel Noir universe due to all the strands of the web getting tangled up. Harry revealed that he was in fact his world's Spider-Man and he was looking into the solution too. And as he was talking with the pair of Spideys, he soon discovered what was causing the web to be dysfunctional. It was actually the Web Warriors themselves, as their watches were essentially causing basically every time the Web Warriors used their watches to jump from one universe to another, it essentially was causing the strands of the web to get all tangled up, especially with the frequency that the Web Warriors were doing it. As a result, however, upon learning this, rather than helping the Web Warriors try and find a solution to this problem, he wound up gassing them and revealed that he was in fact a bad guy. And when Spider-Man Noir tried fighting back by shooting at his face, it caused his face to literally peel back and revealed that underneath his skin was goblin scales, revealing that Harry was not actually a Spider-Man, but a Spider-Goblin. And although this doesn't really do Noir good, because immediately after doing this he gets gassed too, and basically he and Pavitra are paralyzed. As such, with the revelation and answers to how he got here, Harry decided that the best course of action was to, well, take the fight straight to the Web Warriors home base, which is where issue 11 actually begins, as we see the Spider Goblin actually getting to work, pretty much jury rigging the watches of Pavitr and Peter, and basically he's monologuing about how he's Harry Osborn, son of a king and the sire of goblins and spiders and all that crap. And basically since he now learns that the web of life and destiny is what caused his world to be lost to him, well, his solution? Destroy the web. You know, the thing that's supposed to be the very foundation of the multiverse. I'm sure that won't backfire on you at all, Mr. Osborn. You just stay the course. But in the meantime, as Harry's plotting that, back on Earth 803, things are going to hell in a handbasket. While the Spideys and the Electros are still duking it out, the Electros are sadly getting a more of an advantage, as with the battery now in control of the Megamorph Spidey mech, he's now causing untold destruction, and the Spideys can't do anything to stop him. As such, with the realization that they're probably going to lose, the Spideys start kind of weighing their options, as they don't really know how to damage this thing. However, Ben says that he does think he might have a solution, which Hobie, when he hears this, is like, what, do you have like a nuke in your pocket? And Ben's response is, no, I left it at home. And so, sure enough, with this in mind, Ben ends up opening a portal back to either Loomworld or his universe, which I don't know which one it is. Either he goes to Loomworld and gets what he needs, or he goes to his universe and just takes a pit stop at Loomworld. But either way, But either way, he ends up leaving Earth 8. He ends up leaving Earth 803 to get his device. And again, whether the device was at Loom World or whether he took a pit stop to Loom World, the next panel shows him holding what he went to go get and thanking Karn for his help. However, as Karn is getting ready to send him back to Earth 803, he senses that a new threat is on the horizon, and sure enough, that's when another portal opens up, and Spider-Goblin comes in carrying the webbed-up forms of Spider-Man Noir and Spider-Man India. Of course, Ben immediately asks what the hell he's doing here, in which Harry says that he's here to pretty much take control, or that this place now belongs to him, and so on and so forth. And while Ben wants to help fight off the Spider Goblin, Karn tells him that he's got other things to deal with, and well, to just leave Harry to him, because after all, Karn is still an inheritor, and it's been some time since he's eaten. So as such, he sends Ben off so that he can face the Spider Goblin alone, but Spider Goblin says that he can take him as he shows off his wristwatch, and based on what I can tell, he very much improved the functionality of the device so that he can actually more directly harness the energies of the web, which he sadly does off screen to essentially turn the power of the web against Karn. Though we don't see that till later, so that's what I just said, just kind of just what I could infer. Either way, Spider-Ben ends up back on Earth 803, and so as he's swinging around, and so as he returns, the other Spideys kind of want to know what he's up to, and he soon reveals what he went to go get retrieved. The teleconsciousness helmet, the one that in the main universe is what swapped Peter and Otto's minds to make the superior Spider-Man. And likewise, apparently this is what the Electros were using to insert minds into the battery, I guess. But either way, the instant that the Spideys see this, or more specifically Mayday and Gwen see this, they realize what Ben is going to do, but Ben assures them that it's fine. While they aren't for it, he does tell them this is probably the only way, that he's proud of both of them, and that he doesn't really need to and that they kind of honor the name of Spider-Man well, and that ultimately he doesn't have to teach them anything about power and responsibility. But he's going to teach the battery something right away. As Ben plops the helmet on and swings right at the battery. Of course, the battery sees him swinging in and pretty much just thinks that he's a non-issue. After all, he's one Spider-Man against him, who's a hive mind conglomerate of hundreds of Electros. What can he do to them? And which Ben says, yeah, you're hundreds and hundreds of minds, and now one conscience. As he immediately flips on the device, and his mind is jacked right into the battery, and sure enough, the battery feels it right there, and much like with Otto, when Peter did the same thing to him during the Last Wish storyline, the battery is suddenly hit with an onslaught of all these iconic moments from across Spider-Man's life. From being buried under concrete to fighting villains, to trying to save his loved ones, to being buried alive, even giving up the costume. Essentially, from the battery's perspective, he was Spider-Man, and all these defining moments suddenly hit him hard, suddenly hit him hard, and immediately the battery just is like Ben said, he gets a conscience. And as the full weight of his actions hits him, and he quickly realizes, oh shit, we are the bad guys here. At which point, what I do like about this is just as Ben's consciousness gets absorbed into the battery's expression changes. Now, I've usually showcased that the battery's face is like a monstrous design, like it has like big electrical things like beady eyes and a mouthful of sharp teeth. But as Ben's consciousness starts seeping into him, his face starts shifting until it looks like Spider-Man. And so as this happens, the battery ends up calling to all the Electros and tells them to stand down, they're done, the battle is over. And while the Electros do argue, saying, well, why should we do that? Why should we even listen to you? The battery responds with, because I'm your leader, I'm the one in charge, and if you don't listen, I will barbecue you all. Showing that there is still, that's still kind of Max Dillon in there. And the other Electros kind of realize, he has a point, and stand down. As such, the battle is over. The Electros have been beaten, and the day is saved. But, well, sort of, because you see, there's still a Spider Goblin to deal with, and sure enough, after Karn gets his ass handed to him by the good Mr. Osborn, he calls the Web Warriors and lets them know that, well, Harry's now rushing at the web and attempting to tear it apart. And sure enough, we start to see the effects of that in the skies of Earth 803. as they see a fabric, as they see a rip in time and space in the sky. And this isn't like with what happened on Hobie's world, which are causing worlds to bleed into each other. No, this is one of these world destruction things. So essentially, a bad situation has just gotten a whole lot worse. And basically, it's made clear that if Harry continues doing what he's doing, the multiverse is going to go belly up. So they need to take care of this immediately. As such, Anya thinks they may have a solution, and well, it goes back to how they handle this. So basically, here's the plan. Like when Anya and Co were trapped on Earth 138, what they want to do is that they're going to plug Hobie Brown into the Megamorph suit again, and use the energies from said suit to create a strum that's supposed to reverberate with their watches and across the multiverse. Only this time, they're gonna amp it up. In this case, with the power of the battery, since he's the one in charge of the robot now, and the army of Electros, they're gonna mega charge it. They're gonna mega charge it, not just send it throughout their watches, but directly into the Great Web itself, which they believe will not only untangle the web, but also create enough of a surge of feedback so that it will throw the Spider Goblin off. And so, with the cooperation of the battery and the Electros, and with Hobie on a guitar and Gwen on drums, they immediately get to work, play as hard as they can, and sure enough, the energies with all of them do end up surging through their watches and strain to the Great Web, causing a massive blast of energy that does manage to surge the web and does manage to untangle all the strands, while also zapping the Spider Goblin something fierce and throwing him off, severely weakened. And thankfully, this is when Spider-Ham finally re-enters the fray and talks about ends up just he smacks his knuckles into his hand like what I'm doing now, and he just tells Spider Goblin before the concussion, I just want to let you know you're about to get beat up by a pig, and I heard all those bacon jokes. So yep, now the day is saved. So with everything all said and done, that the Spideys end up talking to the battery, and sure enough, he does reveal that Ben is still in there, and with his newly acquired conscience, he quickly realizes that this whole thing needs to be done. As such, the battery agrees to send all the Electros home, and as an extension, it's going to release all of the Electros that it absorbed into his hive mind, which, yes, does include Ben. They'll send him home safe and sound, so everything will be good. But the battery swears to the Spideys that they haven't seen the last of him and that he will be back. Spoilers: he doesn't come back. We never see him again. This is literally his last appearance. Anyway, but either way, yeah. World is saved. The multiverse is good. The web is untangled. Everything is fine. And so, sure enough, the last pages of the comic are back on Loom World as the Road Warriors are recuperating, and we see that a handful of Spideys from the Spider Army, with one of them including Ultimate Jessica Drew, who I don't know why she's here. The Ultimate Universe is supposed to be gone now, but whatever. They're all there, and they're essentially pretty much these handful of Spideys are at Loom World to act as new recruits. And while Spider-Ham tells them that that if they want to keep their lunches, they should put their name on them, which Lady Riley tells them won't work because she did the exact same thing and nothing happened. Basically, the Spideys everyone's just reveling in how good things are going. Sorry. Anya and Billy are happy to see new recruits, but Victor and Octavia are happy to be creating new watches that are supposed to be more elegant and sophisticated and won't cause any damage to the web. And likewise, while Spider-Man Noir reflects on that, everything was kind of their fault. They started all this. Karn also tells him, but they're also the ones that fixed it. They make mistakes, yes, but they're always going to learn from them. And no matter the crisis that'll occur from now on, the Web Warriors will be there to stop it. And that's ultimately where the book ends. With that. So, yeah. Okay, so before I get to my thoughts on the Web Warriors comic as a whole, first let me give my thoughts on the Tangled States storyline. It's just, Again, for me, the biggest problem that Tangled States has is that it feels like it was just rushed. Like I said when I talked about the last issue, the biggest thing it feels as though that they were told that the book was going to be that the creative team behind the book were told the book was going to be coming to an end soon, but they had long-term plans in mind when they were writing it, and sadly with the revelation the book was canceled, they had to wrap up all these plot threads that they had set up as quickly as possible, and as a result, this final storyline feels jumbled and chaotic. It feels like there is so much happening, too much happening, really. And as a result, it can leave you kind of confused. Like, there's so many things that you have to keep track of. It's hard to focus on one. Like, we have on one side we have the Electros, who are causing problems on Earth 803. On another side, we have the Spider Goblin and how he wants to take the battle straight to the Spideys. On this end, we've got the Web of Life and Destiny getting all tangled up and causing chaos throughout the multiverse as worlds start bleeding into one another and the Web Warriors are losing worlds and so on and so forth. It feels like there's just so much happening that it's really getting confusing. That there's just like we got this huge big ass battle going on Earth 803. We've got the Spider Goblin as he's getting ready to start attacking the web. It's just it feels like there's just so much happening that it's hard to focus on one thing. And unfortunately, as a side effect of that, it makes it hard to really get invested in what's going on in the story, because there is so much shit happening that it becomes hard to figure out what you should care about. Should I care about the Electros and how much chaos they're causing, or should I care about the Spider Goblin as he wants to destroy the multiverse? Which is the bigger threat here? Before you say, the Spider Goblin he's attacking the Web of Life and Destiny, but then you got the Electros are a huge friggin' army, and who's to say that they wouldn't just spread out across the multiverse after this? Again, it feels like there's just there's too much happening with too little time. And as a result, you don't really it feels jumbled. You don't really understand what's going on. And again, in the beginning, this sort of thing was really fun. Seeing in the beginning, when we got to issue 7 and saw the world of Spider-Ham 2089 and the Megaworld universe colliding with Hobie's world, it was so insanely stupid that it was kind of amusing. And I liked seeing that. But then you get to this issue, and instead of cooling down and letting you kind of enjoy what you got in the beginning, it just keeps going to the point where it starts being enjoyably stupid and just kind of devolves into stupid. I don't like that. And as a result, it really just feels cluttered, chaotic, a mess, and it's hard to really start enjoying the story when there's just so much happening. When I was doing the plot summaries, I always felt like that everything was just getting so chaotic. The way I was describing it felt confusing and messy. Now, in a way, when you're reading the story, it makes a little bit more sense, but that doesn't stop it from being chaotic. It basically just means that you had to be reading the story. And before you say, well, that's the point in the book. Yes, but if you're still getting visibly confused while reading the frickin' book, then maybe, just maybe, you're doing something wrong. And I'm not gonna blame the writer for this. Like I said, I think it's clear he had long-term plans, and if the book had been longer than 11 issues, then I think that they would have been able to have time to look into those things more and see how they went on. We could have had follow-up to Spider-Man Noir gathering that piece of the symbiote from Spider-Man India's universe. We could have taken our time with these plot points and seen how they developed. We could have seen the team as they began investigating Spider-Man Noir's universe with the Spider Goblin. We could have seen them take their time with figuring out that the web was all tangled up. We could have seen the search for Mayday and Billy, and likewise could have seen things on Billy and Mayday's end as they tried to fix everything. I think that sorry, hold on a sec. Sorry, I had something in my throat. But yeah, I think if the book had just taken its time more and allowed these plot points to develop one at a time, then things wouldn't have felt chaotic. And if they still wanted to have them all converge in the final storyline, at least they would have had more time to develop. It would have been like an Avengers movie, to have all these different storylines develop in different parts of your universe, or multiverse in this case, and then bring them all together. We already know what these threats are. We've seen them in action, and now seeing them all colliding and seeing the Spideys have to go to extreme measures to take them down by creating another spider army to combat it, that I think would have been really cool. But because it's all just so thrown together and all just so mashed up, it feels like a mess. That's what I'm just going to say. The book feels like a mess. I'm not going to call it awful by any means. It's not bad. I'm not going to say it's bad. There are still things in this book that I do think are legitimately cool, and I think if had more time given to it, I think could have been really nice. The beginning of the Tangled States storyline, I think, was promising. like I said, I loved seeing the worlds. I loved seeing Hobie's world colliding with these two other worlds, especially with the insanity that those two worlds brought to it. I liked kind of the calmer moments. I liked the I liked the little character interactions that we got, especially when Pavitr and Spider-Man Noir and Spider-Ham got stuck on the Marvel Noir universe, and Spider-Man Noir kind of had his little argument with Pavitr about why he didn't tell the team about what modern technology bleeding into his world. I think that was really nice. It still had its share of funny, insane moments, like when Spider-Gwen and Spider-Ham 2099 were trapped on Spider-Ham's world, which I loved. I loved Gwen's reactions to all the insanity. She just took it all in with stride, though she did warn everyone not to try the food. There was still some creativity thrown in there, and while I think the Spider Goblin should have had more time to stew, the initial idea I think would have been is interesting. I like the idea of a version of Harry Osborn who was already kind of the Green Goblin in his world, and then you just add on the Spider to it. How would that have developed? What kind of a person was that? How would these two radically different identities merge together into this one whole? How would the powers and abilities of both sides combined together? I think that would be really interesting to explore. And I think if the story had more time, it would have been nice to explore more of the Spider Goblin and how he fit into everything. But again, because of the cluttered nature, we just didn't have the time for it, which I think sucks. I will also say this: I do kind of like how Spider-Ben was able to take down the Battery by giving him a conscience, by hooking himself directly into the Battery and allowing his mind to be absorbed into it, and essentially allowing his goodness to infect the Battery, transforming this monster who wanted nothing more than destruction to finally put his actions in perspective and realize that ultimately what he was doing was wrong. It's like with again. I know I made the comparison with the Superior Spider-Man, but it is kind of like that. In the Superior Spider-Man books, when Peter was trying to get back into his was battling Otto and was trying to get back into his body, how he ultimately made Otto decide to actually use his powers to be a superhero and actually do good was by transferring his memories into Otto and making him relive all the most traumatic moments of his life, making Otto start getting a full grasp of what it means to be Spider-Man and what having these powers entails. And ultimately, that's what inspired Otto to actually put his best foot forward and try to be a good guy. Mind you, again, like I said, when I talked about the Superior Spider-Man, it was still Otto Octavius in the driver's seat, so he was still an asshole. But at the very least, I do like seeing that, and I do kind of like the whole goodness wins out, that the better man can always come through in that type of thing. So I kind of like that we saw that with the Battery here. Ultimately, it's still the Battery because he still shows tendencies of being Max Dillon. He's still kind of arrogant. He's still kind of full of himself. And when the Electros do a question, hey, why should we listen to you if you're telling us to stand down? He tells them, well, then I'll fry you if you don't. They're like, okay, good. Like, that's still Electro. But again, with Spider-Man kind of infecting him in there, of course, he's just a good the goodness is winning out over the evilness. So I like seeing that. I do like that. But again, the biggest fault for me with Tangled States is that it really does feel like a rush job. The book got canceled way earlier than the creative team wanted, and as a result, these long-term plot threads that they had set out to try and build on later and create more stories from ultimately had to be wrapped up quickly, and as a result, too many things were happening at once that made the ending feel cluttered and confusing. That's the best way I can describe it. Now, ultimately, I will give credence to this. I do like that they at least tried to give the book a proper finale. They didn't just, continue on and say, well, we'll see what happens next, and ultimately leave threads open, only for the book to be canceled. They did at least try to put a cap on the story. They at least tried to say, okay, this is the end. We've wrapped everything up. Now we can move on to other things. They at least tried to give the book a proper finale. And you know what? I'll give credit to that. I'll give credit for them. At the very least, that is something I can give the book. It does have a proper finale. They do, like I said, while it does feel cluttered, they did their best to try and wrap up any loose threads that they could. They got Mayday and Billy back. They were able to stop the Electros, and the stuff with Spider-Man Noir's universe was wrapped up. The only loose plot thread that doesn't get answered is, again, Spider-Man Noir having that bit of the Venom symbiote from Pavitter's world. But even that, but ultimately, that does still feel like a minor thing in the grand scheme of things, though it does still get to me that it was just ignored. Because that really did feel like they were going to build on stuff, they were going to build on it later, but it never comes up again. Not even in his later solo books. So it really does suck that was, so I'm still gonna, so while I'll admit it was probably a minor thing in the grand scheme, it also feels dumb to have said, oh, maybe this will be important later, and then it never comes back. It reminds me of episode 4 of Ben 10 when they had the Limaxes and hinted that they were still alive on Earth, and then they never came back in later episodes of the series. So it annoys me, but in a way I can kind of understand. But I can kind of understand why things are why it was probably forgotten. With all the big things happening, some little plot threads are going to obviously be slipping through the cracks, so to speak. So ultimately, Tangled States, I'll say this, Tangled States at least accomplishes what it set out to do. It was there to end the Web Warriors book, wrap up as many loose plot threads as they could, and at least make it feel like a true finale. Was it satisfying? Not entirely, no. While the story itself had moments that I do appreciate and enjoy, as a whole, I think it's just a confusing, cluttered mess. It has the makings for being a great story, it just needed more time to stew, and as a result, and unfortunately, because it didn't, and because everything was just thrown together, it made everything just feel like, a mess. And I think was not a great, and while I'll again still give credit that at least was able to give an end to the Web Warriors books, I feel like that if the book had more time, this ending would have been a lot more satisfying. But as it is, it's just, not awful, but not good, but not that great, but not that good either. Which I find disappointing because the Web Warriors book as a whole, I thought was a really damn cool idea. And from the outset, I think started out as something very interesting that could be explored. As I said, the benefit of the Web Warriors comic was that he was able to essentially recreate the feeling of the original Spider-Verse storyline without needing to raise the stakes that high. Basically, it wasn't some big personal threat that was targeting every single Spider-Man throughout the multiverse. In this case, it was just a team of multiversal Spider-Men doing their thing. The initial outset was that they were supposed to be a team of Spideys who were supposed to go from world to world, helping out in places that those world Spider-Men couldn't because they had been killed in the original Spider-Verse. But from what we saw in the story, we still got some multiversal threats that ultimately were things that the Web Warriors could handle. They first battled a team of Electros. They were interacting with more Spideys from across the multiverse. And one of the things that I did like about, and that's one of the things, and that was another benefit to the Web Warriors book. It allowed us to peek back in to worlds that we probably wouldn't see again. I know I talked about this in an earlier when I finished my discussion on the Electroverse storyline, but again, I think it bears repeating here, and I think it's one of the joys of the Web Warriors book. Through Web Warriors, we were able to peek back in on Spideys that were introduced in Spider-Verse and who we thought we may never see again. We were able to check back in on May Riley, the Lady Spider, and see more of her world and how it operated, especially when we got to meet that world's version of the Black Cat. We got to peek back in on Spider-Ben and how he's acclimating to Mayday's world and being a part of a new Parker family. As we see him get his zest for life back. We see him turn back into the Uncle Ben we all know, except this time he has spider powers. We also see him providing support to the team, helping them out. And another good thing I like about this, we get to see this team of vastly different spider people all interacting and helping one another. In the first issue, we got a very nice interaction between Mayday and Gwen as they talked about their places on the team as well as how Billy was taking things. We saw them have some good character moments as they worked off of each other and clashed with one another but ultimately wanted to help one another. It allowed us to see into worlds that had long since been forgotten, like with the original Spider-Verse, and thus kind of breathe new life into them. In a way, Web Warriors also kind of continued Spider-Man Noir's story, because not only did we see him become a regular member of the team, but Tangled States definitely dealt more with what was happening on his world and how he was involved in this and his own personal thoughts. Hell, in issue 6, we learn more about his life before becoming Spider-Man and what kind of helped turn him into the hard ass that we see today. I like seeing more of that. I think it would have been cool to have little moments like that with the rest of the team as well. That if the book could continue on, maybe have individual issues where they're narrating the story and we learn more about them and their lives, what drives them to do what they do, what wants them to keep going on as their world's resident Spider-Man or Spider-Woman or Spider-Person or whatever. I think it would have been really cool to see that explored, and in some cases, we do see it explored. There are so many interesting and unique ideas that are presented in Web Warriors, and I do kind of like how some storylines are set up. Like, going to Electroverse, one of the things that I like about that story was that it was directly inspired by the events in Spider-Verse. That the Spider-Moon Man who was killed during Spider-Verse ultimately, his death prompted the Electro of that world to want to start exploring the multiverse, which is what led to him finding Mike Dillon and them forming the Electroverse army. I like that was the direct development. I like how that kind of led into one another. And I like that we kind of see that, and I like how that kind of is built on. And again, that's one of the things that I also liked, seeing this multiversal army of Electros all coming together. And like with seeing an army of different Spider-Men there, it was so nice and creative to see all the different variants of Electro that you could see. So like there was like a T-Rex one, there was a horse one, there were female versions, there was a luchador version, there was one that was a friggin' MODOK. I think that's cool. There is so much creativity there in seeing the different variations of these characters you can come up with. And we even showcased that with the Spideys, which again I would have considered that a flaw, but it was still really cool. Plus in the final issue we saw that Anansi was there, so nice to see him helping out again. But again, there were so many unique and creative ideas that you could have had with this. The interactions, the characters. There's so many unique and infinite possibilities when having a team of Spider-Men explore the multiverse. And in some ways, we do see that occur, especially since over the course of the book, they end up recruiting an alternate version of Doc Ock, who's a good guy in the form of Octavia Otto. But again, but ultimately, what disappoints me is that the book just didn't last. While there was so many creative ideas that could have been explored with Web Warriors, so many interesting avenues to explore, so many plot threads that you could have seen intermingled one another, so many things that could have been done, and in some cases we did see kind of done in the books. Like I said, it was still a joy to check back in with these Spideys, and it still had plenty of fan servicey popcorn flick moments that made the original Spider-Verse fun. It's just that, again, it felt like the book was wrapped up too soon. We got Electroverse, we got the No One Knows Nothing one shot, and then we got Tangled States. And ultimately, while each of these storylines varied in quality, they usually had the common theme of trying to bring all these unique and different ideas together and trying to make them work. And ultimately, it's up to you whether they succeeded or not. In my opinion, Electroverse was cool because I liked the grand stakes of it, combined with having it just be a development from the original Spider-Verse and having a team of Spideys battle an army of Electros, and I think that was cool. Essentially just taking Spider-Verse and turning it on its head. Nobody Knows Nothing was a nice character piece with Spider-Man Noir, and while Tangled States, also wrapping up a loose plot there with Spider-Man India, and while Tangled States definitely felt confusing and cluttered, it still had some creativity thrown in there, and did its best to wrap up the book. That's why I feel it's disappointing that the book sadly ended so clunkily. Would I have loved to see this book continue? Yes, I would have loved to have seen more of the Web Warriors as they continued jumping across the multiverse, trying to help out where they could. I would have loved to have seen them meet other Spideys, tune back in with ones that we had seen from Spider-Verse, which, again, we did see in Tangled States with the introduction of Hobie Brown. But maybe they could have also seen other worlds, met other Spider people, learned about their stories, maybe had them help out for a bit, and then maybe go off to do their own thing. I think that would have been also really damn cool. But alas, because the book ultimately lasted only 11 issues, it just kind of fell flat. But if I have to say this, I still think for what it is, it was an interesting idea that at least had some traction. There were two. I would. When I saw these books and when I heard these books were announced, I was happy to order slash per. I was happy to order slash purchase the trades. When I picked them up, I was excited to see what the Spideys of the multiverse were doing. I wanted to see them continue kicking ass like only Spider-Man could do. I wanted to see their characters intermingle and work off of one another. I wanted to see the threats they were facing. I wanted to see storylines develop, and it drew me in. Not just because it was more Spider-Verse action, but at the same time, it was just a unique and interesting idea and story. Like I said, Marvel has done stuff like this before. One example I can think of is The Exiles, which brought a team of interdimensional of X-Men from alternate universes together to jump from universe to universe and fixing problems, which I think is still really cool, and I'm still actively collecting those trades. But at the very so to have a team of Spideys that could jump from universe to universe, fighting bad guys, saving lives, and just doing their whole web slinging thing, I think would have been really cool. And the fact that there was no big threat that they all faced, they just had different missions that they had to take care of to either protect worlds or help the multiverse when needed. I thought was very nice and was very creative. And on the whole, Web Warriors, I'm sorry, I'm getting rambly at this point. On the whole, Web Warriors, I think, was just a creative idea that sadly didn't get as much traction as it could have. Do I think it's bad? No. While it has its moments, I think it's still a somewhat enjoyable book overall. Just because Tangled States was kind of a mess doesn't mean that the whole book failed. I loved the Electroverse storyline and seeing where it went, and I still loved the good character interactions we got from seeing the team of Spideys all working together. So on the whole, Web Warriors I think should have had more time. I'm still glad that I own the book. I'm happy to still have it be a part of my Spider-Verse collection. And at the end of the day, while I'm happier looking at some issues more than others, it's still a creative book and a creative idea that I definitely am happy to have at least read. So there you go. But like I said, that is also that. With today's issue, we have reached the end of what I call the Spider-Verse era. Now, that doesn't mean that the Spider-Verse retrospectives are over. No, 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 no. There are plenty more Spider-Verse related books that we are going to be looking at. Many of whom will follow up on stuff from the original Spider-Verse, some of which will follow up on stuff from Web Warriors, and some that just kind of do their own thing and face entirely new threats. But before we check back in with the Spideys of the multiverse, there's another part of the multiverse we need to check in. Where you see, it's not just the spiders who are gathering together here. There are other threats across the multiverse which require other teams to combat it, other variants to gather together. And well, next time we meet, I think it's time we dive into their side of the multiverse as we bid the Spider-Verse adieu for a while and dive headfirst into what I call the Venomverse era. So till then, I hope you have a good day. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I will hopefully see you on Saturday. Take care.